all of the skill sets that the students learn through game development are used now in every other industry. Even my mechanic, well, guess what? They've got an app. They need their website updated. They need logos made.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 40, the big 4-0 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast, where we discuss the latest game industry topics and trends. I am your host, Chris Volpe, joined as always by Pumpkin, who you saw for a second. We got Baby Girl, who just got a haircut. And of course, every week we are joined by a special guest. This week's guest is my good friend, Henry Bawden. How are you, Henry?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. So, Henry, you are a game developer. You are also, you've been at Columbus State. I've been teaching there about a decade. So you've been leading that sort of art and animation program at Columbus State for quite a while.
Yeah, started 2010. I moved to Ohio in January and began teaching February. So
wow, the time it flies, doesn't it?
A bit.
So yeah, we've got some exciting things to talk about. There's a lot in the industry this week. But before that, I want to kind of pick your brain on a conversation that has been popping up. We talked a little bit about it in the last week's podcast. I did a panel. I was invited to do a panel at the Cleveland Gaming Classic last Saturday. And so I did a talk, and then this kind of came up. But we're talking about students. And we, as you're aware, there have been numerous layoffs in the games industry and in the tech sector in general. Most recently, Microsoft just did a round of layoffs. Lost Boy just did a round of layoffs. So there's been a bunch we've been covering. If I go back in time and look at the articles we've talked about on this show, it's like every week there's some kind of new layoff. But we're talking about students being involved in in this industry, trying to get their education. Are we producing too many students for the marketplace right now? Is this something that we should be mindful of and careful of? Curious your thoughts on it.
Well, I think we are, if we look at it in that myopic view of they're all going to AAA studios. So in that case, yes, we have absolutely too many students, and those students will not get jobs. However, we're not just producing students for the game industry. We're producing students that touch a lot of basic related industries. And for that, there's a huge demand. We cannot fill enough spots in the basic related industries. So
can you give some examples?
Yeah. So students with these types of skill sets can be useful in a lot of places. Let's look at the programming students right off the bat. The programming students, even though they are training for game development, they're building engines, they're doing other stuff, they're coders that have amazing next level creative problem solving skill sets. And so any company that is needing some programmer to build anything, whether it's apps for their company, whether it's diagnostic systems, whether it's databases, regardless of what they need, we're developing students that have the capability to take on those tasks. So it's not just training them for a specific, one-shot thing like cybersecurity or database systems. They're able to do a lot of everything. And if they don't know yet, they have the skill set to adjust. So there are a lot of opportunities there. From the art side, we're producing students that can develop for things like, honestly, any commercial thing, even... how do I put it? Even my grocery store has apps. I go to Sam's Club, it has an app. Well, app development, interface development, UI, UX, like all of those are skill sets that our students are learning in the context of game development, but can be applied in other ways. In Central Ohio, there is a big biotech industry. There's a lot of medical industry. Well, there's opportunities for our students to do VR work for simulations, for diagnostics, for commercial, for training purposes. All of the skill sets that the students learn through game development are used now in every other industry. Even my mechanic, well, guess what? They've got an app. They need their website updated. They need logos made. They need artwork developed. need database systems for tracking and asset management, and those come from the same skill sets, the same core skill sets that our game development students create. And so I've had a lot of friends get laid off over the years, and some stay in the game industry, but a lot of them shift to basic related industries. And then they may come back, or they may stay in those basic related industries. So yeah, if it's just AAA, we got too many folks. If it's everything else, we can't produce enough.
Okay, well that's positive. Yeah, I've been jostling with this question for a while because I've seen other industries. In particular, there was a while where we were producing too many doctors, too many pharmacists, too many lawyers, sometimes too many dentists. So some of these professional schools. But the thing with these professional schools is that their educational pipeline is heavily controlled by the industry itself. Like med schools are determined, your residencies are determined by a structure that's in place through like the AMA, for example. That doesn't exist in most educational programs, right? You just go to a school that offers a degree program. And so my concern is that we're taking kids that are super excited about, like, I want to go work at Nintendo, or I want to go work at Blizzard or whatever. And then it's just not a realistic, I'm not saying I don't want to crush your dreams, right? I'm not saying you won't ever be able to do it, but a 2-year and even a 4-year degree is not going to be enough to get you into Blizzard on graduation. You're going to have to put some time in and get some experience in, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I want students to be prepared kind of mentally for the career journey that they're on.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. I think setting those realistic expectations early is a big part of that, because we have had students from our program. We've got one that's working at Bethesda. We've got one that's working at Naughty Dog. So our students are able to get into some of these
is working at Rockstar.
Yeah. So that's just it. There are those opportunities, but they are limited. Not every kid playing college basketball is going to make it into the NBA. However, there are a lot of other things that they can do with that skill set. So if our students understand that there is work, but it may not look like what they want it to all the time, then we can gear them up to be more successful, because they can still do something that they love. And part of the journey through our programs is helping them to find that. Because they come in like, hey, I like games, so obviously I want to make them. But then they have to figure out, like, what can they do 40 hours a week or more for 8 or 10 years and not go insane. And whatever that is, that passion thing that can get them through the hard times, that skill set can then carry not only to the game industry, but to other industries. And that's what will actually carry them on. So I think as long as we set those realistic expectations that not everybody's going to get into Nintendo. Nintendo's actually very selective and primarily works with smaller teams. So, but because of that, they turn out great products, but it also means there's less opportunity to get to Nintendo. But they might be able to get in with an indie that does similar types of games. They might be able to get in with, other third-party developers. They might be able to get into putting together stuff, interactive exhibits for children's museums, and find that same level of satisfaction and create similar types of assets that they would have. So it's just managing those expectations early on and giving the realistic view.
Yeah, so, first of all, you're crushing my dream, and it makes me sad. I'll never be able to realize my dream of being an NBA superstar, so...
I had to give up the NFL. Straight out of high school, I knew I wasn't going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think so. The term that we use a lot is transferable skills, transferable skill sets that you can use on one thing. I do agree as well. I think this is something that's not mentioned a lot. You mentioned it, but I think that games development, by its nature of being like never-ending constant problem solving, it creates a mentality and a process with game developers that is very valuable regardless of what sort of industry you're in. So yeah, you have the sort of technical hard skills, right? You're a programmer or whatever, but being able to look at a problem through a series of different lenses and different angles and be able to fix it. I'm sure you do too. I know plenty of programmers and engineers that, like, if you give them a spec sheet, they'll code the crap out of that thing. But as soon as a problem hits or they need to kind of like think through a solution, it almost stops them in their tracks.
Yeah, well, and that's been one of the beautiful things that I've seen is a lot of the programmers coming out of our game development programs have been getting hired in front of other people that have taken courses and degrees that were specific to certain fields, but our guys are getting hired first because of that flexibility. And so, I mean, it's a testament to that, what game development brings to the table.
I'm also kind of interested too. I don't have any, this is just like a gut feeling I have, but the games industry in general tends to be a very like open, and I'll say inclusive, but I don't mean that like in a generic sense. Like, we don't tend to hide our networks. If I can connect you to somebody that I think would be valuable and I think that you are, you're serious about it, I'll connect you to anybody in my network. Not every other industry does that. A lot of them, they'll hold their network as like, this is my resource and I want something for it. And so I think that allows us to do things like mentorship and like at GDEX, where we do portfolio reviews. Like, you've done the portfolio reviews, I think, every year that we've done it at GDEX. We'll probably do it again this year.
Yeah.
But we'll have people like you, Marcus Cincy, George Seitz. I mean, people that have been in the industry a long time, have worked on, I think Marcus said he's shipped 38 AAA titles. Can you name a situation or a community where, like, are you going to get to do a portfolio review with, like, Steven Spielberg or something? Like, it just doesn't really happen in a lot of other industries. And I think that sort of openness and communal nature as a benefit overall to the industry.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I've had the privilege of working with a lot of different entertainment industries. And by far the game industry has it's the most open and supportive networks of all of them. Now, to be fair, there are others that are pretty inclusive.
Sure,
like
sure.
I got a book published this last year, and the author community here in Central Ohio is really supportive. Everybody wants to see each other succeed. However, like, trying to get a recommendation for, a literary agent or something like that, that's held a little closer to the vest. Where the game industry, oh, you need a publisher, let me put you in touch with this person. You need, I think there's a lot less competition, and there's also a lot less fear. Like, if I introduce you to somebody and it doesn't work out between you two, I'm not worried about my bridges being burnt with that person because we have a good relationship. And it seems like the other industries, like, there's that fear of, if I share this connection and it doesn't work out, that's going to reflect poorly on me, and I may lose my contract or my connection because of your poor behavior. And so that doesn't seem to exist as much in the game industry. So
I think there's a transactional nature to a lot of those networks in other industries. And then, like I said, I tell people, like, if I think, I'm not going to necessarily connect you to, like, I have sort of, I hate to say like an upper echelon of network, but you know what I mean? Like, people that are super busy, really been in the industry a long time. I'm not just going to connect anyone to them, but it's not because I'm trying to hold you back. It's because I want to make sure that, like, you're serious about this and you're not going to waste their time. There is a little bit where I'm just like, I want to make sure that the people that I send to you, like, if I send someone to you, Henry, I want to make sure that you feel like your time was respected in a way. So there is that. There's a little gatekeeping in that sense, but I think it's done in the way that we're just trying to make sure that everybody's time is respected, that they're valued, and that people are serious when they're engaging in these sort of conversations. It's not done in like a transactional way where it's like, yeah, I'll connect you to Henry, but like, what are you going to do for me, kind of thing. Like, I never think about that as a side thing. The other thing you kind of mentioned that I think is maybe a way that we can foster more development, games development specifically here in the Midwest, which obviously, I mean, it's kind of what we're trying to do in many ways, is finding ways to be able to support developers when there aren't jobs available in those in their area of study, but then also making sure that those doors are available if they ever want to switch back into the game space. And some of that just, again, comes down to networking and whatnot. Just like, oh, hey, a job pops up. I know Henry's looking for a job. Let me actually, I mean, we just did that this morning before the show started, right? So there's that kind of back and forth. But I guess my question to you is, how do you think that maybe we can be on a smaller to mid-sized level, people in your and I's position that have been in the industry a while, have networks? How can we be a little bit more, useful or successful in helping to get these people placed in jobs and build those connections? Do you have any maybe thoughts or tips or tricks?
Well, a big part is just keeping up your networks, which isn't easy. I've got people in my network that I haven't reached out to in a while. And so because of that distance, it's harder to reach out and say, hey, I saw your company's hiring. I've got a person over here. Can I connect you? But there are some people that I can go, 5-10 years without talking to and call them up. And it's like we're picking up from the last conversation. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's difficult in that sense because
I think that's part of
your network is hard.
Sorry, just to jump in real fast. I think that's part of a general professionalism too, is realizing that because I do hear about sometimes people are like, oh God, I haven't talked to this guy in forever, and I'm gonna reach out to him, and it's gonna seem like I'm trying to get something out of him. And I'm like, I wouldn't worry too much about that. We're all busy. Yeah. We're all living our lives. Some people have families, and for me, GDEX is kind of like my thing. Every time GDEX starts to roll around, I begin to hit the sort of same people. I'm just like, hey, how you doing? Are you gonna be able to come to the show? And I kind of use that as my opportunity to reach back out to those people. And then if they're able to come to GDEX, then I can have a more one-on-one, or we'll go grab lunch. Generally, I'm dying over here. Generally, you and I will go and grab lunch at GDEX. We'll go to the North Market and grab ramen or something. I do the same thing with John Bawden from OU, because I don't get to see a lot of these people very much. So that's my time where I can kind of foster that relationship. But yeah, we're all doing stuff. If you haven't talked to somebody in 5 years, it's not like they're going to be like, where have you been? I haven't heard from you.
No, and that's just it. For most of them, again, this comes back to the awesomeness of the industry. For some of the other industries connections I have, that gets a little bit more difficult to navigate. But within our industry, most of the folks, even if you haven't seen them, they're just happy to hear from you again. And so it's less of a barrier. But the idea is, though, you still maintain the networks. And then beyond that, it's just being aware of what's there. I still stay on all of the mailing lists for video game job opportunities. So LinkedIn, I haven't heard much from Gama Sutra lately. I'm not sure exactly what's happening to their job boards.
I actually was just talking to students about that, because this was the week about getting into the industry. And I was like, I don't know if the Gama Sutra boards are as good as they used to be.
No, I think it's because back when they were really kicking it, it's because they were kind of the only game in town. And now LinkedIn and creativeheads.net are the two that have kind of taken over. So I still get at least 2 or 3 times a week, I'm getting mailers from LinkedIn and creativeheads.net with all the latest jobs. And that helps me keep a pulse of what's available, which studios are looking. And so I just keep my eyes out. And so if I do see openings, those are things that I could then pass along to my students. And part of that also is the conversation with students, knowing where they're looking, what they're looking for. And I'm in a unique position with mine that for their one of their final capstone courses, I work with them one-on-one to help them really focus in their portfolio, not just for the area of study, on the art side, whether that's, character modeling or concept art or, something else, but also their specific brand, so that I'm not taking someone who would really be, like an EA type brand where they're focusing on military attired characters and military weapons. And I'm not trying to pair them up with a Disney type company. But by having those conversations, I can then just keep my feelers out, so when things do come up, I can say, hey, by the way, this company, which is right in your wheelhouse, has 20 positions that they just posted. 2 of those kind of relate to what you're doing. I'd recommend applying there. Or, just being aware of what's happening in the industry and what your students' needs are. And then I can make more direct introductions. The other thing is getting them mentors. So, for example, if I have a student that's focused on a specific skill set, I go, hey, these are the people in my network that are already doing this for a living, that are amazing at this. I'm going to check with them and see if I can connect you. And most of the times they're open for it. And so I can get my students connected with a mentor in the area of focus. So that's a couple of the things that we can do to kind of help them out in that process.
Sure. Which goes back to like my number one thing whenever somebody asks, like a student or whatever, I was like, you need to be proactive in your career, and you need to be involved in things like game jams, local game development communities, go to shows like GDEX or MDev or whatever, where you can connect with people. And, I'm working on the schedule for GDEX right now. Hi, sweetie. Sorry, babies want some attention. I'm working on the schedule. We actually posted the first version of the schedule out. I've got a couple more sessions, but I mean, we're going to have, just looking at it roughly, we're going to have like 80 to 100 educational sessions at GDEX this year. Like, that is awesome. A lot. Like, you can pay for the VI, like the professional pass, the GDEX Plus Pro Pass, which is normally $175, and you can get it for like $155 if you're a student. That's Thursday through Sunday. Like, if you're wanting to like strap in, right, and do nothing else for 4 days, and you will just have nonstop like educational sessions from people who know what they're talking about. And so I think that's really exciting. And, I know $150, $175 is not cheap, but when you think about, you're getting 4 days of 8 hours a day coursework plus all the networking events and stuff, like, I mean, that's a pretty inexpensive way to navigate, particularly if you live around Columbus, because you won't have many travel costs. But all right, man, let's get into. I appreciate it. I pinged you. I pinged you because this topic keeps coming up around me, and I wanted to bring on another fellow academic who could kind of talk about these things. So our first article from the. Did you have something else?
Oh, I was going to say, if I could, there's one thing I wanted to circle back to really quick before we jump to it. And that's just the industry as a whole, because I've had students worried about it and reaching out like, wait, I'm seeing the layoffs. Are there going to be jobs and things like that? And I think just talking to the audience quickly about that, about the ebbs and flow of the industry could be useful. For the example, this year, overall game sales are down like 6%-ish, roughly. But that doesn't mean people stop buying games. And so the game industry itself goes through these waves. So even though we can't get all of our students into Nintendo, and some of them may go to basic related industries, as you were talking about, when things do open, we can get them back in the industry. And so it's a cyclical process, or it may be down for a couple years. It always comes back. So even after the crash in 2009, by 2010 it bounced back and game sales were up again. So anyways, just that quick comment before.
Totally. I mean, everything's cyclical, right? Every industry, particularly with the way technology works now, like every industry is going to go up. Some are actually like cyclical in terms of like the year, some are like holiday companies and stuff. Do you want to get down, sweetie? But everything is like, weight loss is cyclical. Finances and the stock market go up and down. And also, I think we do have to keep in mind that in 2020 and 2021, because of COVID, we saw some pretty robust game sales in some of these companies. And so a lot of these companies were doing very well during those periods. That's not sustainable over the course of year after year.
And so now we're seeing, it's a mix of that, as well as some companies trying to shift to AI, and there's a lot more overseas offloading. So there's a whole lot of different reasons, but there was a natural recession that was going to occur with that. And even to your point, you brought up, like, we had too many doctors, too many lawyers, which is true. But at the same time, now in my area, they cannot hire doctors fast enough. They cannot get enough nurses, to the point where Columbus State is now being told by the state, you have to expand this nursing program. We need nurses, where we were overloaded at a certain point. So it's all these things kind of ebb and flow.
Sure, absolutely. All right, so this is our first article today. I thought this was really interesting. This is Microsoft spends $1 billion annually on getting third-party games on Games Pass. So this is a GameSpot article by Eddie Makuch, I guess. Bloomberg reported that Microsoft now spends $1 billion a year getting third-party games on the subscription service. The site said Microsoft offers flat fees of millions of dollars upfront to add titles from smaller game publishers. I thought that was an interesting article because that's a lot of money. Most companies can't afford to spend $1 billion on just getting product in their stores. But I'm curious on your take on. Do you use Games Pass at all? Do you subscribe to that?
I don't. For a couple reasons, but yeah, I think they're trying to follow suit with what the film industry did. I mean, with Netflix and Amazon, all the other streaming service, it's the same type of thing.
Yeah.
And I understand why the big companies want to do that, because for them, it's a steady revenue stream. They're not having to worry about creating new products. It's other people's risk, because other studios then have to deal with the production, the development, and everything else. And they get to just pick and choose which ones they want and then take a percentage. So obviously for the house holding the Portal, it's wonderful. Valve has done great over the years with Steam.
Sure. Oh, totally.
So the Portal holders, I can fully understand why they would invest in that. But the problem that it's developed for I'm concerned that it's going to create a similar type of issue for the game industry that the streaming has for the animation and the film industry, where these things that used to be AAA production titles that would go to theaters and make tons of money became products that didn't really recoup that money, which is why we're getting over time lower and lower quality products, because they know it's going to go direct to streaming. They're not going to get the theater sales from the big release, and it's changed that market, and it's more content on demand rather than being able to do these really nice products that they can develop further. So I think it's interesting. I understand why they're doing it, but it's also a concern based on seeing how the animation industry and the film industry have gone with it, what that's going to do to the third-party developers.
Yeah, it is an intriguing dilemma, because I do think when Games Pass first came out, and probably now, it was the best value for your money you could get in the gaming space. Like, you were just, for $15 a month or whatever, you were getting access to just tons of games. But it does open the door, like you said. You mentioned like the Netflix and streaming. That's been an ongoing thing, even to the point we were looking at actors and writers strikes and stuff around it. But then
it's not over. Especially with Lionsgate announcing, "Hey, we're shifted to AI to do all of our storyboarding,"
we'll see how that works. But I think about Spotify, where artists are consistently talking about, they're like, oh yeah, we had 5 million downloads and made like $11,000, and you're like what? How can you have like 5 or 10 million listens of a song and you're not? And it's because the price per song, is so low. Your cost per click, it's so low. And I think that does put us in a position where, like, I like Netflix as much as the next guy, but I think, I'm not trying to be negative here, but I think 80% of the stuff that they're creating is not that great. It's sort of cheap filler stuff. Every so often you get something cool. You might get like a Squid Game or whatever. But even Squid Game was a pretty low budget thing. Nobody expected that to be as successful as it was. Netflix lucked out on that one. That wasn't like a pre-planned success story, right? For the people that made Squid Game, I'm talking about the Netflix executives. And yeah, I think it's creating this interesting dilemma. And the reason that Games Pass exists at all, this is my take on it, Mr. Microsoft might disagree, but is because Xbox is getting its ass handed to it by PlayStation this console generation. Yes. It
is, absolutely.
Last console generation, it wasn't doing super good. This console generation, it's getting its butt kicked. And so they needed a competitive advantage to try to get people back over into the Xbox, if not buying Xbox consoles, at least into the Xbox brand and ecosystem again. And of course, Microsoft's bread and butter is Windows. So it knows how to create online software platforms. And so I think that's been great. And to be fair, I think, people rip on capitalism all the time. And I think there's plenty of things to rip on capitalism about. But I think this is one of the times where capitalism and free market competition actually worked, where Xbox was getting its butt kicked by PlayStation. It came up with a competitive product in Games Pass that was a really good value for customers, which then forced PlayStation to rework its PlayStation Plus subscription to make that better. So we as gamers and consumers, we all benefited from that situation in a really meaningful way. So I think that's great. But you're right. Like I do worry that this move, maybe this is a little cynical, but it feels like it's just like, hey, why don't we just take all the free-to-play BS in the App Store ecosystem, and we'll just charge you a monthly fee to access that, and there won't be any ads. And you're like, cool, but a lot of the stuff is still not very good.
No.
And the larger games are going to be in this pinch where, are we going to see? I mean, I don't think we'd ever see a Last of Us level game be on something like Games Pass.
No. Unless it was released somewhere else first, they hit their quota of what they needed to, and the Games Pass was just to reboost dying sales for a while. They would have no reason to do that. Well, and I'm hoping that the consumer is savvy enough to make choices about this that are going to be beneficial.
Oh boy,
I know. Because even for me, I would rather spend the money rather than spending it on a monthly thing. I would rather invest in a company. We were talking about this before this started, but what I look for is I'm looking for either a AAA game that I already am kind of invested in, or that catches my interest, or more often than not lately, I'm looking for the indie developer that's putting out their new product. I would rather drop the $6 or $15 or $20 for a mostly complete game by an indie than a bunch of access to a bunch of complete meh games. So the latest one I am in is Chef RPG. It's an early release thing, and I'm enjoying that process of giving them feedback, seeing how the game progresses, and I'm invested with that product because I care about what they're making. And I would hope that more consumers start doing that, or invest in games that people have put time into, they've created a good product, rather than saying, here's a bunch of stuff to fill your time.
Yeah.
And even for me, I would rather go down to my old DVD collection and pull out a meaningful film and watch that on an evening, rather than hop on Netflix and just go through what's next. I don't find as much value from just flipping through the channels, as it were. That's essentially what it's come down to, is we're just channel surfing and hoping to find something that's of value.
Yeah.
Well, then find something of value and invest in that.
Totally. I think it's do you remember when Netflix had the what do you want to watch feature, and it would ask you some questions and it would suggest some stuff? I was like, where did that go? Can we get that back? Because it's just so much. And it's interesting because there are, I said this last week when I had Adam Bankhurst on from IGN, and I think there is this cynicism that sort of permeates, everything nowadays, unfortunately, but this is the best time to be a gamer, I think, ever. You have access to so many games that are just great quality. The problem is there's also a lot of just trash out there. But there's been times where there's been more trash for sure, but there's just so much content. It's kind of hard to navigate, but I'm hoping that I would like to believe that gamers are maybe a little bit more discerning than movie watchers, just by the nature of kind of how the ecosystem works, because I think we've seen in the movie space this change, or at least I'm hoping, right? And I'm seeing things like like Alien Isolate, or not Alien Isolation, Alien Romulus, which came out, which I thought was a fine movie. A lot of people really, really liked it. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is like the best Alien movie ever. I was like, first of all, you're crazy. And second of all, I think people are feeling like that because we're just so used to kind of garbage stuff that when something comes out that's even remotely interesting, we're just like, oh, okay, yeah, we can make good stuff again. And in the game space, the AAA machine, I guess, has been monetizing these franchises into the ground, very similar to what Disney's doing with their franchises. We're just kind of we're done with it, you know. Ubisoft, I have an article here that we might get to, is not doing it. Obviously, we had the Concord issue with Sony. But then when something comes out like a Baldur's Gate 3, it really kind of takes flight because people are like, oh, wow, we actually can make good games that have good mechanics and you could tell are developed by artists that actually care about what they're doing. And it's not like under this, like, you know, bulldozer that's just trying to squeeze out every last ounce of, you know, creativity in a franchise. But I don't know how we can consistently, you know, maintain that kind of quality at the level that people are expecting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, and that's where we've got a couple of challenges in the game industry that the other entertainment industries don't have. Because if you watch a movie, at the end of the movie, you're done. Like that's it. You may, you know, do something with it for Halloween or something like that, but essentially, unless it is a larger franchise, even the Marvel franchise, you watch all the movies, but then when you're done, you're done. With games, they have a couple of different user bases for the experience. So early on, when we were growing up playing games, you would have a game that was a very short-lived experience, but you would repeatedly play it over and over again. I got so good at Super Mario Brothers that I could, you know, one life all the way through, and then you start it again, and we had those experiences. But essentially, we were waiting for that next game to come out. And most of us, we were lucky if we could get one new game a year. So what is that blockbuster hit, either from Nintendo or Squaresoft or whatever? And that was our user experience. And we had those large shared experiences. But now we have a lot of those games still coming out where I'll get something and then I'll have to wait until I have time to play it. And, you know, it's like, great, I'm going to put in 40 to 60 hours on the next Horizon game. Awesome. And that's a one-shot experience for me.
Yeah.
But for my kids, they'll play those games, but they don't like those games as much. They don't consume games in the same way I do, where it's a single experience. If they had nothing but Minecraft and that was it, they would be happy. They don't need other games because they have these legacy games that are kind of taking over too. And so for our market, it's Microsoft purchased Minecraft. The problem is they can't continually monetize off Minecraft other than in separate forms like, you know, backpacks and, you know, the fan base stuff.
Like merchandise.
That's not the game itself, but merchandising, the new film that's coming out, all that stuff. That's the only way they can monetize, because after you paid the $20, you have a lifetime copy. And if they ever tried to say, hey, for this next upgrade, you got to pay money, they would lose a large part of their fan base. So just say, yeah, we're not buying into that. We're going to stay with whatever the core is.
Sure. And that's where like the expansions and DLC kind of come in, which was the promise of, and I don't have a problem with DLC or expansions as long as it's done in kind of a way that's respectful.
And if
to
they're
the players.
meaningful rather than like, hey, we're going to gouge you for this next 3 map pack set.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting because I still predominantly, I mean, I've been on World of Warcraft lately, but I still predominantly play single player games. And I'm looking for that cohesive experience. And back to like something like Baldur's Gate 3, everyone's like, oh my God, you have to play it. And it's like, I know that. It's not that I don't want to play it. It's just, I don't feel like I've got 200 or 250 hours to devote to the game.
And
like
that's
that.
And that's the other problem is there are so many games, and not even the new games. There's so many legacy games and older games and things like that to play. It's time management. Same thing for me. Horizon, I got the second one, and it sat in the plastic for nearly year and a half, 2 years. And I was only recently able to finally play through it when I got sick for a couple weeks over Christmas. It's like, okay, now I can dedicate the time to this game.
I have
like that is the only time I could do these big games.
I'm gonna lose some street cred here in the gamer world, but like I've never played Skyrim. I own it. I own a copy of it, and I have never once taken it out of the box and put it in because I just can't. I look at it.
60 hours of your life just gone, and for working professionals, we can't do that. I'm lucky if I get 5 hours of game time each week because there's all these other things we have to do in the meantime, and so it's harder. And so trying to increase sales with new AAA products that people don't have the time for or the money to invest in, and with a younger generation coming up that aren't really interested because they've got their legacy games that are, Minecraft and Fortnite and things like that, and they have access to all their folks' older games. My kids would rather go down to the basement and play, my Super Nintendo or pull out the N64 or, the PlayStation 1 or 2 rather than worrying about what's the next thing coming out. It's like they've already got access to so much that it's harder to do. The one thing that does get their interest though is the indie market, where they go, hey, we know about this company, we want to try this because they're doing something interesting.
Yeah, didn't you over the past like X number of years, you were taking your kids through kind of like a little historical journey on some of the older games, weren't you?
Yeah, that was part of the fun of just like even nostalgia for me because I've kept all my game systems and everything. So yeah, it's taking them through. My youngest is still hooked on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle. Like he's like, Dad, can I play Bugs Bunny? Yeah, we'll pull that out.
Dude, I recommend, if you can find it, it's hard to find, but the SNES Classic, that's got like 30 SNES games in it. If you go in and look at those, like almost every single one of those are like one of the best games ever made.
Yeah, they were so good.
Yeah, they were just absolutely. So if you can find that out there for like, $80 or $100 somewhere, those games are outstanding. Like they're incredible. I agree, and that's why I tried doing. Yua's on here. Also, he says hi, Henry.
Hi.
I tried doing Game Club with Yua, but sometimes I just get busy, and I try to do a new game a month. I've just sort of fallen. I had my music club too, where I was listening to a new music album every week, and at some point, I just get like, it's just too much. I'm just buried in everything. And so I'm trying to rework my life so that I can get those things back in. I think we're going to do Alan Wake 2 in November. Because I know there's so many great games out there. But sometimes it's just a bit much. I still haven't finished the Cyberpunk DLC. I've been waiting for the perfect time for that. Maybe when I get my PS5 Pro, I'll revisit that.
That's another one that's on my list, but I can't even start Cyberpunk because I know the level of time commitment it would take to play. And I think that's something else that I really enjoy about the indie space is the smaller experiences. Because even if you look at the AAA games, from our heyday with the golden era of the Super NES and other stuff, those were not long games. I can blast through Chrono Trigger in 8 to 10 hours. And then, then I can go, hey, I want to play that again. And this time I'll do it faster with the New Game Plus and explore a couple different timelines. And I max out at 20 hours playing through multiple times versus a new AAA game where even the thought of beginning is going to just first blush is 60 hours. Plus, if I want to do any exploration, it adds. And I think they're going for the bigger and bigger things, but people can't always handle that bigger experience. So that's where I don't know. I like the idea of maybe games reverting back to those smaller game experiences that are more condensed. So kind of taking a page from other industries like film and book and stuff like that, where let's just make a smaller, solid experience and have that. Because I think it wouldn't make much money. Like I know the AAA studios are looking for the margins. How do we get, X number of percentage increase? And we got to get. I think if they took smaller teams and really knocked it out, 20-person teams again, imagine the quality of games that they could give a 20-person team with, a 1-year dev cycle on a retro style game, what kind of experiences they could craft. And those would be so amazing. I would pay for subscriptions if I could get a new one of those every year from those
speaking
companies.
speaking of Ubisoft, they had that. They had their Ubi Arts, where they had, was it Rayman? Was it Legends? I think. Anyway.
And my kids play the crap out of Rayman Legends.
Yeah, and they were trying to do these smaller games. I think they also had what, Child of Light, I think, was an Ubi Arts game. But that kind of faded, and yeah, I agree. We're in this restructuring. It's kind of, we're in this restructuring on like everything in human society right now, and we're gonna kind of see where it lands. I hope that it lands where, what I really hope, whether it's games or movies or politics or whatever, is that we land in a space where, like, why don't we take a breath and be a little bit more mindful about what we're doing here? Let's be mindful about how we invest in our students and our people, how we invest in our infrastructure, how we think about our environment, how we think about social justice, how we think about our video games and our content and our media that we create. And I think that a lot of these larger companies are kind of stuck in a place where they just need to keep generating this revenue to keep the machine going. And that's putting them in a very difficult place, because they can't be like, oh, hey, we're going to go work on 10 games this year that are all smaller. We don't know if anybody's going to like them. We don't know if they're going to work. We don't know if they're going to be attractive to the general audience. So I share that feeling with you. I'm just not sure if the AAA space is going to do it. And then that loops me back to, I guess, another question, which is a question I have been having on virtually every conversation on video games for the past 15 years, is like, a lot of it falls down to discoverability. You know, you talk about Steam generates tons of money. Games Pass, I don't know how much Games Pass is doing, even though they're spending a ton of money. But how do you find these games? Because there is not a mechanism right now that brings, like, you know, you're like, oh, user reviews or whatever, but like, our user review system just seems fundamentally broken. So how do you bring the cream of the crop to the top so that people can find these things? And I am very disappointed. I know I'm on my soapbox rant here, but I'm very disappointed in Steam, where it's like, if anybody has the time and the money and supposedly understands gaming because they're gamers themselves, like, why are you not navigating a discoverability system? I understand it's not easy. I get that. But like, it just seems like you guys are doing nothing really. And then you hear stories about, we had Renee Gittins on a couple months ago, where she released her game Potions: A Curious Tale. And the same day that she'd done all her marketing planning, she'd done all her social media stuff, she had done her interviews and her press stuff, and it was going to come out on a certain day. And then I think it was EA just decided to do like a bulk dump re-release of some of their own titles. They released like 10 games that, you know, got slight revamps the same day as her game, and her game just got absolutely drowned out on this like half-assed old games dump from a large AAA studio. And it's like, how do we, if we're going to create these smaller game experiences, how do we make sure that people can even find them or know about them?
Well, and I think as an industry, that's where we're in a rough spot, because we've got such a high level of saturation right now, and really the platforms that have that voice are not acting in a responsible way. They don't care, because Steam, if they advertise nothing.
All right, looks like we're good. Apologies, my power went out, and then came right back, but it took me a second to get the internet back. So, sorry, you were saying, Henry.
Yeah. Anyways, I was going on my own rant, my own soapbox. I think the problem is the people that manage the platforms are not being good stewards right now, because they don't need to be. They're generating revenue either way. They can promote products they want to, and so I think until we get them to be a little bit more proactive about the community, there's not a lot we can do. And the people that really are making quality products, the games that we would want to see or find, generally don't have the kind of finances to promote it that they need to make it really successful. With most productions I've seen, that our larger productions, you're spending as much on promotion and advertising as you are on the development of the actual product.
Mm-hmm.
And most smaller studios that really are making amazing things don't have that kind of funding or voice to be able to do that. And so we're at a rough place where something's going to need to shift. Either that's we find some venue for promotion beyond word of mouth. And by the way, anybody listening, please, if you find an awesome game, be an advocate of it. Shout it out. Don't just be like, oh, that was a fun game. Tell everybody, please, you guys got to support this. There are so many sleeper hits, and I hate that term because to me, sleeper hit means that it was an amazing product that nobody heard about, and so everybody, lost their jobs or the company went out of business because they couldn't make enough money.
Sure.
I want it to be a hit, not a sleeper hit. Like spread it. Be an evangelist and tell people about these awesome games you're playing to get them to pick it up, so that these companies can succeed and make more quality products. But yeah, until the platforms themselves or the even the publishers, that has changed a lot, where publishers are not doing promotion the way they used to. And so it's hard to be seen at this time. And so that's something else the industry needs to address.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's unfortunate that we're sort of in this position just because there is so much great stuff out there. And I agree with you. If you have a game that you really like, advocate for it, let people know about it. Because I think word of mouth and community building is a really strong way to support those products that you believe in. So,
yeah,
that seems like a good place to stop. Henry, what do you think?
I think that works.
Sweet, man. Well, Henry, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure talking to you and hearing your insights. And thank you, everybody who is in the chat asking questions and communicating with each other. And also thank you for the patience as my power went out. I apologize for that. But so this has been episode 40 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. A reminder that GDEX is around the corner. It's in about a month here in Columbus, Ohio. So you can go to www.thegdex.com. You can come meet us. Speaking of awesome games, there's going to be a ton of really, really cool games. I've played a couple that are going to be at the show recently, and I think they're awesome. So check that out. Also, remember the Sandbox.Space. You can sign up for our weekly email list where we will include the links to the articles that we talk about during the week, as well as a link to this podcast, which goes up on YouTube. But otherwise, I really appreciate you all being here. This has been episode 40 of the Sandbox.Space weekly show. I am your host, Chris. So on behalf of myself, Baby Girl, Pumpkin, everyone in the chat, and our special guest, we will see you next week.